The air was thick with tension as Emma stood at the altar, her heart racing. Beside her, Daniel grinned, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. The guests waited in hushed anticipation, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Then, without warning, Daniel raised his hand, halting the ceremony. "Before we go any further," he said, his voice cutting through the silence, "I have something to say." The crowd leaned in, unaware that this wedding was about to shatter everything Emma thought she knew about love. As Daniel began to humiliate her in front of everyone, Emma's grandfather, Colonel Richard, stepped forward, eyes narrowed, his gaze fixed on Daniel. "You've crossed a line," he muttered, his voice low but filled with authority. The room went still, and just as the truth was about to be revealed, Emma made a choice that would change her life forever. Would she stay or walk away? My answer was in her hands. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The ballroom was alive with excitement, filled with sparkling chandeliers and delicate white roses that lined the aisle. Every corner seemed to glow with an elegant warmth. The music, soft and gentle, played in the background as the guests took their seats, their eyes trained on the altar where a new chapter was about to begin. It was Emma Walton's wedding day, the moment she had dreamed of for so long, a dream that had seemed impossible only a few years ago. Emma stood at the altar, her heart racing with joy. She could barely believe she was here, dressed in a beautiful ivory gown, a far cry from the life she had known. Just a few years ago, she had been waiting tables at a small diner, barely scraping. Now she was about to marry Daniel Harper, the man who had swept her off her feet. He was everything she had ever wanted, handsome, successful, and kind, or so she had believed. Today, she thought, was the day her struggles would finally be behind her, the day she would leave the hardships of her past in the rearview mirror. Daniel stood beside her, tall and confident, his blue eyes shining under the soft glow of the chandeliers. He was dressed in a sharp tuxedo, his smile wide and reassuring. But there was something about his smile that made Emma feel uneasy, hint of something she couldn't quite place. It wasn't a smile that made her feel loved. It was the kind of grin that said, "I have everything under control." As the priest began the ceremony, the guests fell into a hushed silence. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the whole room was holding its breath, waiting for this perfect moment to unfold. Emma could feel the eyes of everyone on her, the weight of their expectations pressing down on her shoulders. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but something in the air felt off, like a quiet storm that hadn't yet broken. The priest spoke softly, his voice a comforting rhythm as he recited the vows. Emma's heart fluttered in her chest, her hands trembling slightly. She was nervous, but it wasn't because of the ceremony. It was because of the man beside her. As the words of the vows filled the room, Emma couldn't help but notice how stiff Daniel seemed, how his hand didn't feel warm against hers. It was as if he were standing in front of a crowd of strangers, not about to marry the woman he claimed to love. Just as the priest was about to continue, Daniel raised his hand, his voice cutting through the silence. "Before we go any further," he said, his grin now stretched a little too wide, "I'd like to say a few words." Emma's eyes widened in surprise. The guests shifted in their seats, murmuring softly. This was unexpected. Daniel wasn't the type to make a speech. He wasn't one to take the spotlight unless it was absolutely necessary. Emma turned to him, a smile forming on her lips, her heart filled with anticipation. What could he possibly say? She wondered. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice a little too loud. "Well, everyone here knows I'm not really the speech type," he began, his words tumbling out. "But I figured, what the hell, it's my wedding day, right?" There was a nervous laugh from the guests, but it didn't reach Emma's heart. She felt the tension growing between them. What was he going to say? "I just want to take a moment to thank Emma," he continued, his tone casual. "I mean, she really shot for the stars, didn't she?" He paused, letting the words hang in the air, before turning to the crowd. From waiting tables at a greasy diner to wearing a designer wedding gown in a hall like this, it's pretty inspiring, right? Emma blinked, her eyes widening in confusion. The room fell silent and a few uneasy chuckles came from the guests. They didn't know what to make of it, but Emma felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of disbelief. Why was he saying this? She didn't understand, didn't. She thought this was supposed to be her moment, their moment, but now it felt like she was a joke being made in front of everyone. Daniel, oblivious to the shift in the room, continued. From Section 8 housing to Section A guest list, he said, his voice too loud. A nervous laugh rippled through the guests, but Emma's heart sank. She wanted to shrink into the floor, to escape from the cruel spotlight he had just cast on her. This was not the man she thought she knew. This wasn't love. It was a game, a test she hadn't even been told she was playing. What are you doing? Emma whispered, her voice barely audible, her hands shaking as she tried to steady herself. The room seemed to blur, and for a moment she couldn't focus on anything but the sting of Daniel's words. She had been so sure. She had believed in this man. She had believed that after everything she had been through, this was the reward she deserved. The love of a man who understood her, who saw her for the woman she was. But now, standing here in front of everyone, all she could see was the cruel reality of the man beside her. Daniel shrugged, his smirk never fading. Just telling the truth, babe, he said nonchalantly. Isn't that what marriage is built on? Truth? His words hung in the air and Emma could feel her heart shattering. This was not the love she had imagined. It was something else entirely, something cold and detached. As the silence stretched, Emma could feel her world unraveling around her. The perfect wedding, the perfect moment had turned into a nightmare. The man she had trusted, the man she had given everything to, had turned her into a punchline. But even in that moment, something inside Emma stirred. A quiet strength, something deep within her that refused to let him break her. She couldn't let him. Not here. Not now. She glanced over at her grandfather, Colonel Richard Hayes, who stood in the back, his eyes narrowed in disbelief. Emma knew that he had seen something in Daniel she had missed. Her grandfather, a man of honor, had fought battles Emma couldn't even begin to imagine, and now, it seemed, the battle for her dignity was about to begin. The room had gone deathly silent, as if time itself had frozen in place. The soft melodies of the string quartet now seemed distant, drowned out by the heavy tension hanging in the air. The guests, once filled with excitement, exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to make of Daniel's words. Emma's cheeks burned with embarrassment, her heart pounding in her chest. She had always imagined this moment as one of pure love and joy, a celebration of the life she had built with Daniel. But now it felt like her world was crumbling around her piece by piece. Daniel, oblivious to the ripple of discomfort that had spread through the room, continued his speech, his voice growing louder, more confident with each word. You see, he said, his eyes scanning the room, I had my doubts about Emma. Not about marrying her, no, I knew that would be easy. But about whether she truly loved me or just wanted what I could give her. His voice oozed with arrogance, his words cutting through the air like a knife. Emma's stomach churned, her hands trembling by her side. Was he really saying this? She could barely process what was happening. She had always thought Daniel cared for her, that he saw her as more than just her past. But now he was treating her like a pawn in some twisted game. I tested her. Daniel continued, his voice dripping with superiority. I told her I was broke last month, lost everything in a lawsuit, watched her face turn pale, watched her hesitate. He chuckled, clearly enjoying the attention his words were drawing. Can you blame her? Who would want to marry a guy with nothing? Emma's breath hitched in her throat. The words stung, each one a sharp reminder of how small he made her feel. But it wasn't just his words that hurt. It was the public spectacle he was creating. Her life, her struggles, everything she had worked so hard for was now fodder for his entertainment. She could feel the eyes of the guests on her, their gazes heavy with judgment, and she wanted nothing more than to disappear. The priest, clearly uncomfortable, stood silently, unsure of what to do. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. Emma's eyes welled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. She couldn't let Daniel see her break. Not in front of all these people. "You see, I had to test her," Daniel said, his grin widening. "I needed to see if she really cared about me or if it was just about the things I could provide. So I pushed her. I tested her loyalty." He turned to the guests, holding up his phone as if showing them proof of some great achievement. "I even saw the messages she sent her friend. You know, about how she might need a backup plan just in case. That's what I saw." Emma's heart sank, the truth of Daniel's betrayal hitting her with full force. He saw those messages. She had confided in her friend, unsure of what to do when things felt uncertain. But she had stayed. She had stayed because she loved him, because she believed in their future. And now Daniel was using her vulnerability against her. The room seemed to spin around her as his words continued to echo in her mind. "Don't act shocked, Maya," Daniel said, the mockery in his voice unmistakable. "You played me first. You weren't as honest as you thought you were." It felt like the ground was slipping out from under Emma's feet. The man she had trusted, the man she had given everything to, was now twisting her love into something ugly. The shame burned her cheeks, but the anger was starting to rise in her chest. How dare he? She had given him her heart, her trust, and now he was shattering both in front of all these people. But just as she felt like she might collapse under the weight of it all, she noticed something. Her grandfather, Colonel Richard Hayes, had been standing silently in the back, watching the entire exchange. His military uniform, though retired, still held the weight of respect and authority. And the look on his face, stern, unwavering, filled with fury, was enough to make Emma's heart skip a beat. The moment Daniel finished speaking, there was a brief pause in the room. The air seemed to grow even heavier, and Emma could feel the tension building. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew that something had to change. She couldn't stand here, humiliated and broken, for one more second. Without warning, Colonel Richard stepped forward, his movements deliberate and slow. His presence commanded attention, and the room fell into a stunned silence. The guests turned their heads, their gazes shifting from Daniel to the colonel, who was now standing directly behind Emma, his eyes locked on Daniel with a look that could cut through steel. Daniel, still holding his phone up as if to prove his point, turned around, his face faltering when he saw the colonel's stern expression. There was no smug grin on his face now, no sense of superiority. Colonel Richard's presence was like a shield, a force that made Daniel shrink back just slightly. The colonel was a man of honor, a decorated military officer with a reputation that spoke for itself. And now that same reputation was about to make Daniel regret every word he had just spoken. The room seemed to hold its breath as the colonel's voice rang out, low but powerful. "Daniel Harper," he began, his words sharp and steady. "I taught my granddaughter to walk with dignity, to never bow, even when life tries to knock her down. You, on the other hand, have shown none of that dignity. You've used her trust as a game. And now you've humiliated her in front of her family, her friends, and everyone who cares about her." Emma's eyes widened as the full weight of what was happening hit her. Her grandfather was standing up for her. He was defending her, not just as her protector, but as someone who understood the importance of respect and honor. "You," Colonel Richard continued, stepping closer to Daniel, "don't deserve her. You've proven that today, in front of everyone. And I won't stand here and let you disgrace her like this." The colonel's voice carried the weight of 1,000 battles, his words a firm declaration that Daniel's actions would not go unchecked. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but the colonel raised a hand, silencing him. "The ceremony is over," he said, his voice commanding and final. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected someone to stand up for her in such a powerful way. And yet, as the colonel's words hung in the air, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone. Not anymore. As the colonel stepped back, Emma turned to face the crowd. The guests were now on their feet, but not to cheer for Daniel. No, they were leaving, some in disbelief, others nodding in quiet approval of what had just transpired. Emma felt a new sense of strength rise within her, and without a word, she took off her veil and stepped off the altar, walking away from Daniel and the life she thought she would have. As she passed through the crowd, Emma held her head high, her heart no longer heavy with shame but filled with something far more powerful: freedom. As Emma made her way down the aisle, the sound of her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor was the only sound that filled the space. The murmur of the crowd was soft but growing louder, and Emma could feel the weight of their eyes on her back, but it no longer mattered. She had walked away from the man who had tried to break her. No, she hadn't walked away from him. She had stepped into her own power. The air felt different now. What had once been a room filled with anticipation and joy was now heavy with silence. People stood frozen, some unsure whether to continue watching the aftermath, others slowly realizing that they had witnessed something that would stay with them long after the ceremony ended. Emma could feel the eyes of everyone in the room, but didn't look back. She knew what she had to do. She had to leave. She reached the grand entrance where the heavy doors opened automatically, revealing the world beyond. The evening air was cool against her skin, and Emma took a deep breath. It felt like a fresh start. She stepped out, leaving the life she had known, leaving behind everything that had led to this moment. She wasn't broken. She was free. Free from the man who had humiliated her. Free from the life that had once seemed like a dream come true. Now she was finally free to live her own story. Outside, her family and friends were waiting for her. Sophie, her best friend since childhood, was the first to reach her. The young woman embraced Emma tightly, her arms wrapping around her with the warmth of support. "You did it," Sophie whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed him. You showed all of us." Emma smiled faintly, the tears threatening to spill, but she held them back. She couldn't cry over what had just happened, not anymore. Instead, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the people who had stood by her, for the family who loved her unconditionally. Sophie handed her a shawl, draping it gently over her shoulders. Emma's younger brother, Ben, gripped her hand tightly, the comfort of his touch grounding her in the moment. "Aunt Helen will want to speak to you," Sophie said, nodding toward the small group of relatives that had gathered near the entrance. Emma nodded, but she didn't feel like facing any more questions. Her mind was racing with thoughts, with emotions she couldn't quite name, but she didn't feel scared or angry. She felt free, like she had just shed a layer of skin, like she had been born again. "Let's get out of here," Ben said, his young voice full of determination. Emma turned to him, her heart swelling with pride. He had always been there for her, through the thick and thin of her struggles. "We'll go to the diner, get some pie," he added, his words almost making her laugh. "The world can wait, right?" Emma smiled, her first real smile since the ceremony began. "Right, the world can wait." She made her way through the small group of people, giving brief hugs and grateful smiles, though her heart wasn't fully present in the conversations. It was all so surreal, like a strange dream she would wake up from at any moment. But she didn't need to wake up. This was real. She had walked away from the man who had tried to break her, and now she was stepping into a new life, one where she controlled her own future. As she reached the parking lot, she spotted her grandfather, Colonel Richard Hayes, standing by a black car, his expression as unreadable as ever. But when he saw her approach, he softened, his eyes full of pride and something else, something Emma couldn't quite name. He had been through so much in his life. A decorated military officer, a man who had seen the horrors of war and fought. For honor and dignity, he had always been a pillar of strength for Emma, and now he was standing by her once again. "You did the right thing," Colonel Richard said, his voice low and firm, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. You walked away with your head held high. That's more than most people will ever manage in their lifetime. Emma nodded, unable to speak, her emotions swirling within her. She had always admired her grandfather, had always looked up to him as the embodiment of strength. But today, he had shown her what true strength looked like. It wasn't about power or pride. It was about the courage to stand up for yourself, to walk away from the things that no longer served you. It was about knowing your worth, even when others tried to make you doubt it. Later that evening, Emma found herself alone in a quiet diner, sitting at a small booth by the window. The neon sign outside flickered softly, casting a gentle glow on the street. She was still in her wedding gown, her hair slightly tousled, but she didn't care. The world outside had slowed down, and for the first time that day she felt at peace. She picked at a slice of lemon pie, her favorite comfort food, and tried to calm her racing thoughts. Everything had happened so fast. Her wedding, the humiliation, her escape. It was overwhelming, but there was a calmness in the chaos, something that told her she had made the right choice. A familiar voice interrupted her quiet moment. You always did love lemon pie, the voice said, soft and kind. Emma looked up, her heart skipping a beat. It was Colonel Richard, who had followed her into the diner. His warm smile was comforting, and Emma's eyes welled up with tears. Tears that finally flowed freely now that she was alone, with no one to watch her, no one to judge her. I remember everything, he added, sitting down across from her. For a few moments, they sat in silence, just sharing the quiet company of one another. Emma felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. In a world that had tried to break her, her grandfather was the one constant who had never let her go. After a moment, he pulled something from his coat pocket, a small, polished box with her name engraved on top. Emma raised an eyebrow in curiosity, her heart fluttering. What could this be? Open it, Colonel Richard urged gently. Inside the box was a note, folded neatly in delicate handwriting, her mother's handwriting. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she unfolded the letter, her fingers trembling. The words were familiar, full of warmth and love, just like her mother's voice had been before she passed away. My Emma, if you're reading this, it means today was your wedding day, and I'm not there. But if that man made you feel anything, less than the queen you are, walk away. A wedding is a day, but your worth is forever. Love, Mom. Emma's tears finally fell, raw and unrestrained. They weren't from pain anymore. They were tears of release, of letting go. She had walked away just as her mother would have wanted her to. And now, she was free. Meanwhile, back at the venue, Daniel's world was falling apart. The photos, the leaked messages, and the story of his cruel actions had spread like wildfire. The truth was now out there, and there was no turning back. His reputation crumbled, his business lost its endorsements, and soon, even his closest allies began to distance themselves from him. But Emma wasn't concerned with him anymore. She had already started a new chapter of her life. A few weeks later, she stood in front of cameras at the launch of her new foundation, the Unveiled Foundation. The mission was clear: to help women who had walked away from toxic relationships, just as she had. And standing beside her in full uniform was Colonel Richard, his hand resting on her shoulder, a silent symbol of the strength and courage she had inherited from him. You turned your pain into power, he said quietly to her, his words carrying the weight of a lifetime of wisdom. That's what real leaders do. Emma smiled, her heart full of hope for the future. She had found her purpose, and it had nothing to do with the man who had tried to break her. It had everything to do with the woman she had become. And as for Daniel, he was watching the press coverage alone in a quiet bar, his future uncertain, his name already forgotten. The days following the wedding were a whirlwind of emotions for Emma. But unlike the storm she had expected, this whirlwind felt more like a cleansing breeze, one that blew away the lingering shadows of doubt and fear. The pain of the past few hours was fading, replaced by something more powerful, something she hadn't even realized she was capable of until that moment. She had walked away. She had stood tall in the face of humiliation and left behind everything that had tried to break her. And now, the journey ahead was hers to define. The unveiled foundation had been born out of the darkest moment of her life, but it was quickly becoming a beacon of hope for so many others. Emma wasn't alone anymore. Not in her heartache, not in her strength, and certainly not in her vision for the future. She had discovered that what she had been through was not just a personal tragedy, it was a shared experience, one that countless women across the world could relate to. She spent her mornings meeting with volunteers, helping to set up support groups and connecting with women who had walked away from toxic relationships much like she had. The stories poured in, each one different, but each one echoing the same theme: betrayal, emotional manipulation, and the strength it took to walk away. Some of the women were just starting their journeys, still unsure of how to rebuild their lives. Others were further along, confident and strong, but still needing support as they faced the challenges of rebuilding from the ground up. Emma listened to every word, offering her heart and understanding, knowing that this foundation was more than just a charity. It was a community. And in that community, women found strength in each other, much like Emma had found strength in herself. A week after the wedding, Emma was sitting in her office at the foundation, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the desk as she looked out the window. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the city, and for the first time in weeks, she felt at peace. The chaos of the wedding day, the humiliation, and the fallout from Daniel's cruelty felt distant. And, while Emma wasn't naive enough to think she would never feel that sting again, she had finally realized that the pain wasn't her enemy, it was her catalyst. Her strength had been forged in the fire of betrayal, but it was also tempered by the support of those who loved her and the incredible women she had met on this new path. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Sophie. Emma smiled, her heart warming at the thought of her best friend. The two of them had been inseparable since childhood, and Sophie had been her rock through the darkest of times. "Found something amazing," Sophie texted. "You'll want to hear about it. Meet me at the diner?" Emma's fingers quickly typed a reply. "I'll be there in 10. As she arrived at the small diner a few minutes later, Sophie was already seated in a booth near the window, a steaming cup of coffee in front of her. Her face lit up as soon as Emma entered, and the two of them shared a hug, the kind of hug that only best friends could give, full of warmth and comfort. "You won't believe what I found," Sophie said with a grin. "I was doing some research for the foundation, and I stumbled across a potential donor, a wealthy philanthropist who's interested in what you're doing. She's willing to match every dollar we raise for the first year. But here's the kicker. She wants to meet you personally. She believes in the cause and she believes in you, Emma." Emma's eyes widened with surprise, her heart skipping a beat. "Wait, really?" she asked, trying to process the incredible news. "I mean, that's unbelievable. Who is she?" Sophie hesitated for a moment, her expression turning serious. "Her name's Celeste Sinclair. She's known for supporting women's rights and charitable organizations. And I'm not sure about this. There's something about her. She's not just offering money, she seems really invested in the mission." Sophie paused, clearly thinking through her words carefully. "I think she sees something in you, Emma." Emma leaned back in her seat, the enormity of what Sophie had said slowly sinking in. This wasn't just about raising money anymore. This was an opportunity to take the foundation to the next level, to expand its reach and impact more lives. Celeste Sinclair wasn't just offering a donation. She was offering a partnership, one that could change everything for the foundation. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Emma admitted softly, the weight of the responsibility settling on her shoulders. "What if I let her down? What if I can't do it?" Sophie reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You've already done it, Emma. You've already shown us all what true strength looks like. This is your moment. Don't doubt yourself. Emma's mind raced as she thought about the path ahead. She had come so far, from the woman who had once doubted her own worth to the woman who had just launched a foundation that was already changing lives. She couldn't afford to doubt herself now. This was her chance to make an even bigger impact, to help even more women who needed the strength to walk away from situations like hers. Later that week, Emma met with Celeste Sinclair at a quiet upscale restaurant. Celeste was an older woman, her silver hair pulled back into a sleek bun, and her sharp eyes held a quiet power that was impossible to ignore. As they sat down across from each other, Emma felt a mix of awe and nervousness. This was the woman who could take the foundation to new heights, and yet, as she looked into Celeste's eyes, she realized something. Celeste wasn't here just because of the money. She was here because she saw something in Emma, something worth investing in. Over the course of their lunch, Celeste shared her own story of overcoming hardship. She spoke about growing up in a small town, being the daughter of immigrants, and the challenges she faced as a young woman, trying to make a name for herself in a male-dominated world. But it was the way she spoke about helping others that caught Emma's attention. Celeste didn't just want to make a difference with her money. She wanted to create a legacy of empowerment, of lifting others up when they couldn't stand on their own. By the end of their meeting, Celeste had pledged her support to the Unveiled Foundation. Not only was she willing to match every donation, but she was also eager to help with mentorship, guiding Emma as she navigated the next phase of her mission. Emma was speechless. This was more than she had ever imagined. This wasn't just a donation. This was the partnership that could change everything. As Emma walked out of the restaurant that afternoon, the weight on her shoulders had shifted. She wasn't carrying the burden of doubt anymore. She was carrying the future of her foundation, the future of the women she was helping, and the future of her own life. She had done it. She had taken her pain, her humiliation, and her strength, and turned it into something that could change the world. Back at the foundation office, as the team celebrated the new partnership with Celeste, Emma took a moment to reflect. Her journey had started with a painful betrayal, a public humiliation, and the gut-wrenching realization that the man she loved had never truly seen her for who she was. But that moment, that terrible moment, had ignited something in her, a fire she couldn't extinguish. And now, standing on the threshold of something even greater, Emma knew one thing for sure: the past no longer defined her. She had become the woman she was always meant to be, a leader, a warrior, and most importantly, a woman who had learned to walk away with dignity and grace. And with that, Emma Walton stepped into her future, ready to take on whatever came next.